Welcome to the Empowered Team podcast. I'm your host, Kari Schneider, and this is all about self-mastery for leaders. I am here to give you the tools, the skills, so you can keep being your best out in the world. This is episode 1 in our next series. Now, if you didn't recall or didn't listen to our last series, it was on the inner game. We're talking the things that we think, and we used questions to be mastering the inner game. So by all means, go back to episode 384, 385, 386. Great questions for the inner game. This is the beginning of episode 1 for the next series, which is this interactive game. How do we communicate? How do we represent ourselves and interact with other people? Today is all about lies. Yeah. This is the truth about lying. I'm going to give you the 3 main ways that we lie and people lie to you, and you do it too. It's all happening. Today, these 3 main ways that you lie are going to impact your leadership, how you show up in relationships, how you show up in your life, and how people are interacting with you. So let's dive into this topic. It's a good one. Ooh-wee. Have you ever been in that situation? I know I have, where you know something, like the real truth about the situation that's happening, but the person that you're talking to doesn't really know the whole thing. And what you may not be telling them is that they're on the verge of getting fired. Or I remember back in high performance sport, they're on the verge of being cut, but they don't know it. So what's being told to them is different than what is actually going on. They're getting either a complete false representation, maybe partial truths. It's hard to say there. And what's happening is that person just doesn't know. Now, you've either been in that situation where you find out something later and you're like, wait a second, I had no idea. Why didn't they tell me that in the first place? Have you ever said that? Or you might be in the boat where I can't tell them the whole thing. I really need to play it out this way so that it's not as impactful negatively, or so that they don't react in this type of way. So what we're doing is that we're massaging the truth, some people say, or we are telling them what they need to know. That's a need to know information. And then, in essence, we're lying. So what do we do? How are we doing this? I'm going to give you some stats on this. I'm going to give you a little research on this. And I'm going to give you the 3 main ways we lie and why we do it so that you can understand yourself when you're in these situations. Let's go. Okay. What I've described is not a rare situation. The research shows that this is happening all of the time. Now, lie number 1, the first way that we lie, is the obvious one. The obvious lie. Someone has completely told the opposite of the truth, or they've said something that completely did not happen, has never happened, and everybody does it, but nobody thinks that they do it. So what I mean by that is we all know that other people lie, but we don't think we're the liars. And we might not think other people are lying as much as they are, but everybody's lying a whole lot. And it's way more than what we would think. And this is what the research says. There's a person named Dr. Robert Feldman. And Dr. Robert Feldman he's a psychologist at the University of Massachusetts. And this was done and published in the Journal of Basic and Applied Social Psychology back in 2002. So he wanted to study people and how they behave when they're trying to make a good impression. So maybe it's a first impression, or maybe it's someone that we really respect. And so he recruited 121 pairs of students and told them that they were studying people, how they interact when they meet someone new. And so away they went. They're being filmed and they're interacting. Now, I happen to be in the dating world right now and on a dating app, and I wish that I could film and point out where someone's lying, because I wish there was more truth being told. So here's what they do. They have a simple 10-minute conversation, and they are basically, some are trying to be competent, some are finding out things that they didn't know, but the whole thing is being recorded, and here's the kicker, on hidden camera. So they didn't know they were being recorded, but afterwards, the researcher, Feldman, he asked them to look at the videotape and asked them to identify, point out anything that they had said that wasn't true. Ho, interesting. The results shocked even the researcher himself. What they found was they didn't expect lying to be such a common part of daily life. 60% of people lied at least once in the 10-minute interaction. And on average, 2 to 3 lies. Some people hit 12 lies in the 10 minutes they were interacting. And there were things that seemed simple, that they didn't need to lie about, and they didn't know they were doing it until they watched the video of themselves. Isn't that bizarre? And these are just plain lies. So what were they lying about? Let's say agreeing they liked something like a movie that they didn't like. Have you ever done that? In this moment, you think, oh my goodness, I've lied about that so many times. Or claiming to have skills that they didn't have skills in. Interesting. One guy said that he was the star of a rock band. Like an actual rock star. Yes, I'm a rock star. Lies. And this is the fun part because you're working or you live with or you're around men and women. And men and women lie differently. They lie roughly the same amount, but here's the thing. Men tend to lie in a way that makes themselves look better. Women tend to lie in a way that makes someone else look better. Even though both men and women are roughly lying about the same. Go figure. Lying. That's what we're doing. So why do leaders do it? Leaders are typically lying to protect themselves, manage the perception, especially when the company's on the line, and lying to avoid conflict and also to seem more competent than they actually are. I think we've all heard of imposter syndrome. And when someone's in a leadership role and they don't know what the next step is, or they're uncertain about how to make the next move, that's when they tend to feel apprehensive, uncertain. And this is where people tend to misrepresent. So what it costs is what's called trust debt. It's when we're doing little things, there's a little withdrawal going on that trust. There's a little withdrawal from your own credibility account. And when this is happening over and over, little by little, the team notices, the people around you in your relationship, they notice, but they don't call it out. Because calling out an obvious lie feels really uncomfortable. Now, sometimes you can call it out. The way I do it, I'll be like, whatever, that's such bullshit. That's what I would do, but do it in a kind of laughing, fun way. What I like to do is give people a dignified exit. If you know someone's lied and they've lied in front of you, but you can tell the body language, their eyes, how they move, there's something about the situation that you're like, oh, that wasn't true. And so what I like to do is kind of laugh and give them the out by saying, oh, you're so full of it, or that's not true. That can't possibly be true. And they either double down on the lie or they laugh it off too and be like, oh, you're right, ha ha ha, kind of thing. And that's where I think it gives people the opportunity to reconnect, because people are lying all the time. And it's not because they're trying to do something harmful to someone else. It's because they're either insecure and they want to boost their own credibility, or they're trying to make something better or trying to avoid conflict. It's people doing people things, being in survival mode in whatever way. So that's lie number one, the obvious one. And I'm not going to give you today all of the tells that are there, because usually with the obvious lie, most people can tell something's off. They may not know how or why or what the tell is, but there's subtle cues, there's subtle perceptions that we're picking up on that are indicating a lie. You know what it is, but that's number one, the obvious one. And if you have the opportunity to give someone the dignified out, by all means do it. I think it's a kind thing to do. And I don't like calling people out on a lie, but I also don't like permitting lying in important relationships. So that's lie number one. Lie number two is a very sneaky one. And this one I find very dangerous, but I am not innocent of it. I know I've used it so many times. I used to say that becoming a parent makes you an automatic liar. Becoming a parent has you massaging things in so many different ways in order to get some outcome with a child, in order to make their world better, in order to prevent conflict. So this next one is number two, lying by omission. This one, here's the research around this. It started with a simple question. Why do basically good human beings, good people, why do they lie? That was the premise for some of this research. And this research was done by a behavioral economist and professor at Duke University named Dan Ariely. And this was a bestseller. I really love the concept of the book. And this is how I titled this podcast, is The Truth About Lies. And the title of this book is The Honest Truth About Dishonesty, How We Lie to Everyone, Especially Ourselves. And this is a book that came out in 2012. So he ran dozens of lab experiments where participants could cheat on math tests for money. That's the part that cracks me up. So not only did they get to cheat on math tests, but they were doing this for money, easily, anonymously, with almost zero chance of getting caught. So they got these opportunities to continue to cheat. But what he found was that it's called the rational crime theory. It's that people didn't cheat as much as they could. So the opportunity was there. They had more and more of it. And they didn't just keep going. They didn't just keep cheating. What happened was they cheated just enough to still feel like they were a good person. So just enough to feel like, oh, I'm not a bad person. You ever have brownies sitting out in your house? I've had this where there's baking or something sitting out in the house and there's multiple people. There's one time years ago where there was only 2 other people in my household. And every time the cleaning lady came through, the baking that was on the counter went down significantly. Now, I didn't know if it was somebody in my household who was blaming it on the cleaning lady or if it was the cleaning lady who was eating the baking. But one way or another, it was being done just enough that it wasn't so obvious, but it was clearly going down and there wasn't as much as of the servings that we anticipated for that evening meal. And so somebody was lying somewhere, but you just didn't know who and didn't know where. So in this research study, what was happening is that people would be caught up in this rational crime theory where they would just do enough to still feel like they were decent. And they called this, as a nickname, the Fudge factor. We lie up to the level that lets us look at ourselves in the mirror and not judge us really harshly. And the most comfortable lie is the one where technically we told the truth. So this is where the lying by omission comes in. It's where someone tells you what happened, but they omit a very key part of the context that makes a huge difference in that scenario. They tell you that the person got in the car accident and it wasn't their fault, but they didn't tell you that the person was high on marijuana while they were driving. They tell you that the person didn't get the thing in on time, but they didn't tell you that they had plenty of time to do it and they were choosing to do something else that wasn't as important as the project that was the priority. So there are all kinds of ways that we can tell the truth, but we've omitted something key in that part that we're telling. And what it does is it's lying by omission. It's lying by leaving parts out that the other person would have wanted to know or needed to know in the whole picture. They're not getting the whole picture. So lies in these participants in the research there would be justifications, and the justifications sounded something like, well, it's not a lie if you don't miss the really important details, or it's not a lie if you miss just some of the details, Or it's not a lie if someone else is happy or they wanted to know that information. Or it's not a lie if your salary depends on it. So these are all justifications for some of the things that they were doing. And these are real quotes from real participants. And this is what we as humans are doing all of the time. So here's where the slippery slope comes in. And this is for leaders specifically. So the same researcher, Dan Ariely, studied massive organizational scandals. And this is things like accounting fraud, doping in sport, insider trading. And in almost every case, it started with one small omission that ended up growing. One little rounding up on a number or an expense report, one thing that was not mentioned in a meeting, then another, and he called it, in his research, he called it the slippery slope of dishonesty. And really, it's that first step that's always the most dangerous. Now, what I call this in my coaching and the advising that I do with high-level leaders, I call this the first domino. And the first domino can be a vicious cycle into something that's disastrous, or the first domino can be a virtuous cycle into something that's really powerful and positively impactful. So in their research, they called it the slippery slope of dishonesty. And what it did was led to these big scandals or big problems that were monumental. So for leaders specifically, omission is an area where a lot of leaders live on the day-to-day. And they have to, because they do live in an environment where not every detail is for every person. And so they have to decide what gets shared and what doesn't for the person who does need to know and for the person who doesn't need to know. And so the omission is happening a lot in the leadership realm. Not lying outright, but strategically editing. Now, strategically editing sounds really nice. It sounds like a good leadership trait. And ultimately, it's still a form of lying. Not sharing the full performance data. Not mentioning the risk. Not saying what they actually think to certain people or in the room. It feels safe, but really it's not. It is a slippery slope and it can cause real problems later on. What it costs is a psychological safety on the team where people sense that they're getting a strategic edit, aka a lie. They sense that they're getting part of the picture and they stop trusting the picture entirely. Now, this is happening all the time in leadership environments. This is where what we want is transparency. We want to say what hasn't been said, especially in a leadership room on a leadership team. Now, you can imagine this in relationships as well, how it erodes trust where only certain things are being partially shared and strategically edited. Then we are in an environment where we lose the psychological safety and trust gets eroded over time. So that's the lie number 2. Where's the lying by omission? So we've got lying outright, lying by omission. And the third one, this one I think is the most dangerous one. It's the most dangerous one. And when we look at it from an evolutionary standard, why did it happen? Why did we evolve this way in order to do this most dangerous one? And what it is self-deception. It's when we lie to ourselves. And we lie to ourselves a lot. This research was done by a person named Dr. Robert Trivers. He's an evolutionary biologist and an anthropologist at Rutgers. And he authored the book, The Folly of Fools, The Logic of Deceit and Self-Deception in Human Life. This is back in 2011. And this person spent 40 years asking the question that really bothered him. Why would evolution keep self-deception around? Why would we as humans not evolve out of lying to ourselves? What would be the benefit of us continuing to deceive ourselves and lie? Because it causes a lot of problems, so why would we keep it around? And if we lie to ourselves and it has us lose touch with reality, it should have been weeded out thousands of years ago, but it wasn't. So why? Why would this continue on? And this is the crazy part. And this is where it comes into leadership. It comes into relationships a lot. We deceive ourselves first so that we can deceive others more convincingly. Hang on to that for a second. I've discovered this in close relationships that I've had in my life where I can usually pick out a lie. I can usually figure out where, number one, where the obvious lie, or number two, somebody's omitted something. I can usually figure those things out. And that works for me. But where it becomes really challenging is where someone lies and it feels true, it looks true, it acts true in so many ways, and then you discover later that it's not true. And you realize it's because they were lying to themselves. And that's why when they've lied to themselves, no one else can really detect it along the way. Now, why would we do that? Because when I say they and them, that's me. I've lied to myself in so many different ways in order to manage the situation, be able to get through something that was really hard. There's lots of reasons that we do it. So when you believe your own lie, your body doesn't leak the signals. You know, those little eyebrow raises or the way that the language comes out, it sounds different when somebody's lying. No nervous eyes, no uptick in your voice, no tells. The self-deception removes the evidence. It's not a defense mechanism. It's an offensive weapon. Consider that. This is how they described the self-deception as an offensive weapon. And of course, when this is used really well, then the primary reason that we're fooling ourselves is to fool somebody else. Really, we end up being the fool in the long run because oftentimes it doesn't work out the way we want it to. It might on the short term, but usually in the long term, it doesn't. So he even found that when people lie, they unconsciously use the words I and me less. And this has been common in FBI research, in language research, where I and me is used less so that we can distance ourselves from the thing that's not true. Isn't that what everybody does in a situation of acquisition? Isn't that what everybody does in merger? So there's a distancing of I didn't blank or I did blank. So there was a photo experiment that Trivers ran. He did this study where people were shown photos. There was a real photo and one that was digitally altered to look better than the real photo or worse. So you've got three photos. You've got the regular photo, you've got one that's just a little bit better, and one that's just a little bit worse. And most people consistently picked a version of themselves, like when they had to pick which one is me, which one's the real one, which two are the altered two. And consistently, they would pick a version of themselves that was more attractive than the actual photo. Interesting. This is what we want to see happen. Not because they were lying, but because they genuinely believed it. And what happens for leaders, here's the real cost. And this is where high performers get trapped. And I've worked with high performers in sport and business for, if I combine the time, for 30 years, 30 plus years. The more successful you are as a leader, the more sophisticated your own self-deception is. It becomes more and more sophisticated because the story of who you are as a leader has to be built. And the more it gets built, your brain protects that story. All we are as human beings are meaning-making machines. We tell stories. That's what we do. That's what we're meant to do. We tell all of these stories. And when we're telling stories to ourselves, to build our own confidence, to build the situation, to bring others along, especially as a leader, then that's where it can become really dangerous. It can also motivate people. It can also help people. And at the same time, we have to get really honest with ourselves to discover, whoa, slow the bus down here. If I'm not honest with myself, how am I going to be honest with other people? And that can be the most revealing. It can be heart-wrenching too, but the most revealing, fulfilling, and growth-causing exercise is to get really honest with ourselves. So you might be here. You might be in a space of leadership where you stop getting honest feedback, where you are, because you've signaled that you don't want it. You stop seeing the gap between your self-image and your own impact. It looks like this. You're surprised when people don't respond the way you expect them to respond. You keep running the same play or doing things the same way and wondering why you're getting the same result. You're not getting the result you actually want. The feedback starts to feel like an attack, not like information. That's a huge clue that you're not being honest with yourself about something. And that's where the role that I'm in with high performance leaders is I end up doing this a lot, which is helping them get honest with themselves. Now, for me in my life, I make sure that I've got a coach, I've got a therapist at all times, because that's what I'm doing for other people. And I have to make sure I'm cleaning up my own brain weeds, my own messes, my own stories, to make sure that I'm being honest with myself. And trust me, it can be agonizing. The work that I do with the leaders and the positions that they're in, the work that they do on themselves can be agonizing and so worth it, because what they have in the long run, it ends up being a deeper connection. It ends up being more impact. It ends up being bigger results, faster results than they could have had before, because they didn't realize there was all this noise getting in the way of what they needed to deliver from who they actually are. So when the self-deception is cleaned up, it's the most powerful thing. So not only is it the most dangerous, but it's also the most impactful and the most powerful when it gets cleaned up. Really, really good stuff. Okay, so let's recap this. We're all lying. We're all lying to other people, and other people are lying to us. We're basically human liars. When we can distinguish the three ways we're lying, it's easier to identify when other people are doing it and when we're doing it. And when I'm not teaching this, I'm not saying this in order for us to point the fingers to other people. It's so that we can clean things up and have greater human connection, have greater positive impact on the world. The lie number one is the obvious one. Lie number two is the omission. People are doing this a lot. Lie number three is the self-deception. That's the most dangerous one. And when we clean it up, it's the most impactful one. And remember, men and women, we're equally lying. Men tend to lie a little more to look better for others. Women tend to lie a little more to have others look better. So there you have it. There are the lies. Here's what my challenge is to you. Go out there and live your life and do a little truth check. Did I lie in that last interaction? Let me think about that. That one stretched the truth a little bit. Take a look at spots in your life where you might be not as truthful as you'd like to be. The more you clean it up, the more kind you are to yourself, the more kind you are to others, and the more powerful your impact will actually be on the world. So let's go. There's your self-mastery today. You've got this. Keep having an empowered week. Go get it.